They said property prices would crash in 2023, but now, in a stunning U-turn, the National Australia Bank have come out and said, oops, sorry, we were wrong, no property crash in 2023. In fact, property prices are going to rise substantially both this year and into 2024. So the question is, if they were wrong with their predictions before, how can you trust their predictions today? Well, that's why in today's episode, I'm going to go through exactly what NAB have to say about the Australian property market. I'm going to go through their data points and give you my thoughts based on my now 21 years of investing experience. So if that's what you're after, stay tuned. Hi, it's Nero here, and let's begin by looking at the first of 3 different perspectives I want to share on NAB's property price predictions. NAB now expects 4.7% property price growth. But is anyone listening anymore? That headline is so telling, right? Because here you have a major bank at the start of this year saying property prices are going to crash and scaring so many people from entering the market. And now they're coming out and expecting property prices to rise. And as you'll see in a moment, in some areas even boom. So how can you make your decisions based on these property price predictions when they keep flip-flopping all over the place? But let's keep going through this article. It was once expected house prices would fall 15 to 20% in 2023. Yet this never came to fruition, forcing major banks such as NAB to upgrade its forecast for this year and next. And if you've been following me for any length of time, you'll know that I've been saying that 2023 is a great buying opportunity. So much so that I actually went and bought as much property as I possibly could at the start of this year, because I did not expect property prices to crash, and I said that property prices will start to rise based on the supply and demand metrics that we were seeing. And now others are starting to say the same thing. Let's just have a look at the key points from this article, which is that NAB expects house prices to rise 4.7% by the end of 2023, a revision from its previous -4%. I mean, how they could come up with 4.7% is beyond me, okay? All I'm going to show you here is that they are finally starting to admit that they were wrong and the property prices are not going to crash. But as you go through their predictions, you're going to start to see just how ridiculous some of them are. Sydney is expected to lead the way with a 6.9% increase, followed by Perth with 6%. Propertyology's head of research, Simon Presley, said Aussies shouldn't rely on the major banks' predictions entirely, and I would 100% agree with that. Take from these articles, take from NAB's property price predictions that yes, the trend in property prices is now positive. Yes, prices are rising in multiple areas around the country, but then don't make your decision on where to buy based on what NAB have to say, as you'll see in just a moment. And here's a second article that goes through the numbers in a bit more detail. Sydney house prices to rise 12% over 2 years, NAB. Sydney house prices are poised to rise 6.9% this year, NAB says in its latest forecast, reversing its earlier prediction of a 2.2% decline. The bank is predicting that by the end of next year, Sydney prices will increase by another 4.9% for a total of 12% over 2 years. Now, to me, this is really conservative, and I'll share some data with you in a moment that backs that up. So here we have the actual NAB residential property survey results, which is what they are using to make these massive price property predictions. NAB has revised up our outlook for property prices with the demand-supply imbalance offsetting the drag from reduced borrowing power and affordability as rates rise. We see the RBA lifting rates to 4.6% by September, then staying on hold until 2024. That sees property prices rise by 4.7% this year and around 5% next year as the rate cuts begin to add some support. Now, there's a lot in those 3 lines to unpack. Number 1, there aren't enough properties available for people who want to live here. And this is something I've been saying for quite a while. So even though there are some people who are struggling with their mortgages, even though there are people who are going to sell their investment properties or their own homes, even if they don't want to, it's not going to crash the market, because every time a property comes on the market for sale, there are multiple buyers who are interested. That's what it means by the supply and demand imbalance. Demand is so much higher than supply. But secondly, they talk about rate cuts in 2024. And I totally agree with that. I think even rates could be cut as soon as the end of this year, but certainly in 2024. Now, what is that going to do to property prices? Well, right now, there are lots of people out there who either want to buy another investment property or want to buy their own home, but they can't because their borrowing capacity has been smashed because of all these interest rate rises, and they're seeing prices rise. So what's that doing? That's increasing the desire to buy property, right? You don't want to miss out on those property gains. And so many people are sitting on the sidelines waiting for interest rates to fall, waiting for their borrowing capacity to increase so they can jump in and they can get that next property or their first property. But while they can't, while they have to sit on the sidelines as interest rates are rising and property prices are rising, their desire to buy is increasing, right? And so what you're seeing is this desire to buy, this massive demand that's still sitting there out of the market, right? These demand and supply imbalances that people are talking about are what's happening right now, which means that there aren't enough properties for the number of people who want to buy and who can buy. What this does not talk about is a number of people who want to buy, but who can't yet buy because their borrowing capacities have been smashed. And a good number of them will be able to buy when interest rates cut. So what's that going to do? That's going to further increase demand. It's going to further worsen these supply and demand imbalances. And then that's going to really increase the rate at which property prices will rise. And that's why for so many people, if you can afford to buy an investment property, you really want to be buying in as soon as you possibly can so that you don't miss out on that future capital growth. Now let's look at what else NAB had to say. The NAB Residential Property Index bounced sharply in Q2, supported by rising home values in most capital cities during the quarter and solid rental growth amid below average vacancy and supply shortages. Confidence also lifted sharply with recovery expectations now much firmer. Overall, NAB's one-year confidence measure lifted visibly to plus 46 points, with the two-year measure also stronger at plus 48 points, with both confidence measures printing above survey average levels for the first time since late 2021, early 2022. And remember, where were interest rates in late 2021, early 2022? They were still at record lows. So here we are with interest rates at the highest they've been in over a decade, and consumer confidence in property prices is increasing. Why? Because more and more people are starting to see that there aren't enough properties, demand is higher than supply, property prices are rising, and more people want to buy. Either it's their own home or an investment property, and the only thing that's stopping so many people is just their borrowing capacity. With Australia still experiencing very low rental vacancy and strong demand for rental property, and an overwhelming number of property professionals assessing rental markets in their local areas as undersupplied, rental expectations remain elevated. The average survey forecast in the next 12 months and in 2 years' time was unchanged at a healthy 4%. With rental growth outpacing home values, gross rental housing yields should also continue to rise. And that's another reason why so many savvy property investors are jumping into the market, because they can see that this is a great opportunity, not just to get capital growth from prices rising, but also to get rental growth, which will improve their cash flow. Now, let's have a look at how much the NAB thinks property prices will rise in most of our capital cities, and why I think they're actually wrong in many cases. So here we have two charts to compare against. On the left is the view from NAB Economics, the NAB Hedonic Dwelling Price Forecast, and on the right we have CoreLogic's Home Value Index for the last quarter, okay? So let's go and look at what NAB says is going to happen to Sydney. They say in 2023, property prices are going to rise 6.9% for 2023. Now, that's got to be wrong, because if you look at what's just happened in the last 3 months in Sydney, according to CoreLogic, which is that first dark blue bar, you can see that property prices have already risen 5%. So that means that NAB says they're only going to rise another 1.9%. There's no way. right? This is very, very conservative. I think they've definitely undercooked what's happening in the Sydney market, okay? Let's have a look at Melbourne. They say that prices will rise 2% for this year. Yet, if you look at CoreLogic, which is and the second dark blue bar there, you can see that Melbourne prices have already risen 2%. That's just in the last quarter. Okay, so again, I think these property price predictions are very, very undercooked. Brisbane 5.4% according to NAB, Adelaide 3%. If you've seen some of pockets of Adelaide right now, they're rising 3% almost every couple of months. So again, as positive as these property price predictions are in terms of reinforcing that a property boom is underway in Australia, I would not be using these predictions to say these are the best places for you to buy an investment property in, because I think they're fundamentally wrong. But let's look at the last two property price predictions. You've got Perth being 6% rise this year according to NAB, and if we look at what's happened so far in just the last quarter, prices have risen in Perth just under 3%. So that might be the only one that may be accurate, but again, remember, this is looking at all of Perth, and if you look at certain pockets of Perth, they are far exceeding this, but then there are other pockets that aren't doing so well. So again, remember, these are just general city-based property price predictions. They should not be the fundamental thing that you use to determine where to buy property. And of course, look, Hobart, it's the only market that's expected to decline, and I would agree with that as well. So what's the takeaway message from NAB? They were wrong at the start of 2023. Property prices are not going to crash. They have now come out and admitted that, but they're still extremely conservative. And I think you're going to find that in 6 months' time, these property price predictions that they've come out with are going to be fundamentally wrong. They're going to be undercooked in some markets, overcooked in some markets. And that's why you want to do your research, you want to do your due diligence, and don't just buy where a major bank tells you to buy. That's not going to work for you. If you want help to find out how to work out the best places to buy an investment property, then click the link in the description for a free copy of both the digital and audio version of my book. And if you want to find out more about our buyer's agency service, you can as well. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.